Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously energetic journey into the hidden mechanics of nature. We're going to uncover the invisible forces that literally govern life on Earth. We'll be zooming all the way in on life or death interactions between individual animals, and then pulling all the way back to look at the grand, sweeping scale of an entire ecosystem's health. It's going to be a fun ride, so let's dive right in.
Let me ask you a question. Would you willingly swim right into the mouth of a giant moray eel? I'm guessing no way, right? It's a completely voracious predator on the coral reef. With just one snap of its jaw, it's game over. But if you look closely at these reefs, you'll see this tiny little fish called a blue streak cleaner wrasse doing exactly that. It literally swims right into the eel's open mouth. And the crazy part? The eel doesn't eat it. Why? Well, because this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. The wrasse gets a free, easy meal by eating tiny parasites out of the eel's mouth, and the eel gets a vital cleaning service that prevents disease. It's an absolutely perfect partnership. So, to make sense of all these wild relationships, ecologists use this really neat visual shorthand. It's basically a plus, minus, or zero coding system, and it tells us exactly who wins, who loses, or who is completely unaffected in any ecological interaction. A plus means a species benefits, increasing its chances of survival and reproduction. A minus means it's harmed. By grouping interactions into this simple little matrix, we can decode the entire complex drama of nature. Let's break down the three main ones.
First up on our list is competition. This is what ecologists call a minus-minus interaction. It happens whenever individuals of different species have to compete for a limiting resource. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that because resources in nature, think food, water, physical space, are strictly finite, the very act of fighting for them negatively impacts both species involved. They both have to burn up precious energy, meaning mathematically they both take a minus.
To really bring this to life, think about something you've probably seen in your own backyard. Garden weeds, battling it out with your cultivated plants. Those pesky weeds, and the tomato plants you actually want to grow, are locked in a ruthless minus-minus battle for soil nutrients and water. And here's the kicker. Even if the weeds eventually win and choke out the tomatoes, those weeds still had to expend tons of energy fighting for that water in the first place. It's a struggle that taxes both sides.
All right, let's move on to our next interaction, which is a bit more intense, predation. This one is your classic plus-minus scenario. It's an interaction where there is one very definitive winner, the predator, who gets a nice meal and scores a plus, and one very definitive consumed loser, the prey, who takes the ultimate minus. It's definitely a harsh reality of the natural world, but it's an absolutely vital one for transferring energy all the way through an ecosystem. For a textbook example, just picture a lion attacking and consuming an antelope. The lion clearly benefits, right? It gets the energy it desperately needs to survive and reproduce. Meanwhile, the antelope takes that ultimate minus. This is probably the starkest, most obvious example of exploitation out there in nature, where one organism is just directly feeding on another. But hey, nature isn't just about fighting and eating each other. Contrast predation with our third category, mutualism. This is a beautiful plus-plus interaction. It's where both interacting species actively boost each other's chances of survival and reproduction. Just like our tiny cleaner wrasse in that giant moray eel from earlier, both partners walk away from the interaction way better off than when they started. For an incredible land-based example, check out this partnership found down in Central and South America. There are certain acacia trees that actually grow hollow thorns, purely to provide a safe home for stinging ants. The tree even produces special nectar for the ants to eat. And in return for room and board, these highly pugnacious ants act as a tiny, fiercely aggressive defense force. They will swarm and attack any herbivore, whether it's an insect or a large mammal, that tries to snack on the tree's leaves. They'll even clip away competing vegetation that dares to grow too close. It is a flawless plus-plus mutualism. All of this really boils down to one profound truth about life. Eating and avoiding being eaten are prerequisites to reproductive success. Because of this constant, relentless pressure, prey species don't just sit around waiting to be someone's lunch. No, they engage in this completely fascinating evolutionary arms race with predators. Over countless generations, natural selection refines their defenses in ways that are just mind-boggling.
And honestly, one of the most stunning defenses out there is mimicry, which generally comes in two main flavors. First, you have Batesian mimicry. Think of this as the ultimate evolutionary bluff. A totally harmless species mimics a truly dangerous one. For example, there's a completely harmless hawk moth larva that literally puffs up its head to look exactly like a small, venomous snake. It even weaves back and forth and hisses. Predators get freaked out and leave it alone. Then you have Muellerian mimicry. This is where two genuinely harmful or gross-tasting species, like a cuckoo bee and a yellow jacket, actually evolve to resemble each other. They team up on a shared warning design, so predators learn much faster to just stay away from anything wearing those black and yellow stripes.
But get this, mimicry isn't just a defensive trick for prey. Let me introduce you to the ultimate shapeshifter of the ocean, the mimic octopus. 12. That is the sheer number of different marine animals that this single species of octopus has been officially documented impersonating in the wild. And it uses these disguises not just to hide from predators, but to safely sneak right up on its own prey. Let's run through a bit of its playbook, because it's unbelievable. If it gets attacked by a damfish, the octopus will hide 6 of its tentacles in a hole and wave the remaining 2 around to perfectly mimic a banded sea snake, which, conveniently, happens to be a major predator of the damfish. Or it can flatten its body completely flat and arrange its arms to trail behind it, swimming along the ocean floor exactly like a poisonous flounder. It can even mimic a stinging stingray by flattening out and dragging just one single tentacle behind it like a venomous stinger. It's an absolute masterclass in survival tactics.
Okay, so we've been looking at these incredible, highly specific micro-interactions. But what happens when we zoom out? How do all of these individual survival tactics, the competition, the predation, the mutualisms, the crazy mimicry bluffs, how do they actually shape the health of an entire ecological neighborhood? Like, how does an ecologist look at a whole forest or huge coral reef and determine if it's actually healthy?
Well, let's see how all those little interactions build up to the macro level. Ecologists measure the health of a neighborhood by calculating its community diversity. But here's the thing, we don't just go out and count animals. True community diversity relies on 2 distinct essential measurements, species richness and relative abundance. We absolutely need both to truly understand the structure of the community. So let's define them real quick. First up is species richness. Think of this as basically just your raw tally of how many different kinds of organisms live in a specific area. If you take a walk into a forest and you spot oaks, maples, birches, and beeches, your species richness is simply 4. It's just a basic head count of the different species categories present.
But then we have the second, and honestly equally crucial piece of the puzzle, relative abundance. This is the mathematical share, or the percentage, that each species holds within that total population. It asks the deeper question. Out of all the trees in this entire forest, what fraction are actually oaks versus maples? To really see why this matters, let's look at a quick comparison.
Imagine a forest with exactly 100 trees. We'll call this Community 1. In this forest, those 100 trees are split perfectly evenly among 4 different species. Let's call them A, B, C, and D. So each species makes up exactly 25% of the forest. This right here is a mathematically balanced, beautifully healthy ecosystem. Because the relative abundance is so even, if a nasty disease sweeps through that only targets species A, guess what? 75% of the forest still remains totally intact and healthy. Now, compare that to a second forest, Community 2. This forest also has exactly 100 trees, and it also has 4 species. So its species richness is exactly the same as the first forest, but it has a heavily skewed relative abundance. Here, species A makes up a massive 80% of the entire forest. Intuitively, if you walked through this second forest, it would feel way less diverse, and ecologically speaking, it's incredibly vulnerable. If that same pathogen hits species A here, the entire community structure pretty much collapses. This is exactly why agricultural monocultures, planting miles and miles of just one single crop, are so susceptible to being wiped out by disease. A lack of relative abundance creates extreme fragility. So what does this all mean for us? Well, from that single tiny wrasse swimming inside an eel's mouth to the mathematical harmony of a massive, diverse forest, nature is profoundly interconnected. Understanding those specific micro-level plus and minus interactions, who's competing, who's eating whom, who is helping out whom, that is the absolute key to grasping the macro-level community diversity we just looked at. The smallest gears are what turn the biggest wheels.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty big question to ponder. If an entire community's diversity relies on this incredibly delicate balance of interactions, the specific niches, the careful relative abundances, the precise predator-prey arms races, how exactly does our massive human footprint alter that equation? When we clear-cut forests, when we trawl the ocean floors, or even when we accidentally transport pathogens across the globe, we are ripping up the very fabric of these interactions. It's definitely something we all need to think critically about as we continue to study and interact with the natural world around us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep exploring out there, and I will see you next time.